My name is Claire Whitman, and I was 31 years old when my mother finally looked me in the eye and told me I had 72 hours to give back the only thing I had ever built. Not borrow against it, not share it, not help with it, give it back. Like it had never been mine. Like the 4 years I had spent sleeping under a leaking roof, sanding rotten floorboards until my hands split open, answering guest emails at 2 in the morning, learning how to fix plumbing from strangers on YouTube, and turning 9 acres of weeds and wind into one of the most photographed retreats in Oregon had all been some cute little phase I was supposed to outgrow. She stood on my porch in cream-colored linen pants, sunglasses on top of her head, looking past me at the wildflower fields like they were already someone else's property. "Your brother needs this more than you do," she said. That was how she said it. Not with shame, not with hesitation. With the quiet certainty of a woman who had spent my entire life believing Ethan's emergencies were always more important than my survival. But that day did not start on my porch. It started 8 years earlier, in Seattle, at a restaurant with white tablecloths and a wine list my father pretended not to read before ordering the second most expensive bottle. Ethan had just finished his MBA at the University of Washington. He was 28, polished, confident, wearing a navy suit that made him look like the kind of man banks trusted before checking his numbers. My father, Richard Whitman, was 56 then, still running Whitman Inns, the small hotel chain he had inherited from my grandfather, and expanded just enough to call himself self-made. My mother, Margaret, sat beside him with perfect hair and that soft, proud smile she only wore for Ethan. Halfway through dinner, right after dessert arrived, my father tapped his glass with a spoon. Ethan leaned back like he already knew something wonderful was coming. I was 23, sitting at the far end of the table, still paying off community college credits and working front desk shifts at one of my father's properties on weekends. "Your mother and I wanted to make sure you had a strong start," my father said. Ethan smiled before the sentence was finished. My father slid a leather folder across the table. Inside was the deed to a 2-bedroom condo in Seattle, 19th floor, water view, parking included. Purchase price, $910,000. My mother added that they had also set aside $75,000 for furniture and another $250,000 as seed money for Ethan's first hospitality investment fund. "You can't build big if you're worried about small things," my father said. Ethan stood up and hugged him, my mother cried. The waiter brought champagne. I remember the bubbles rising in my glass while I did the math in my head. $1,235,000 before Ethan had earned a single dollar on his own. Then my mother reached over, squeezed my wrist, and whispered, "Your time will come too, sweetheart." I believed her because daughters are stupid that way, when they still think fairness is delayed instead of denied. 3 years later, I graduated with a hospitality management degree from Oregon State. I had a 3.8 gigapascals, 2 internships, and $41,000 in student loans because my father said paying my tuition would teach me dependency. We did not go to a white tablecloth restaurant. We went to a roadside diner outside Salem because my father said he had a meeting later and didn't want to make a whole production out of it. Ethan didn't come. He sent a text to the family group chat. "Congrats, Claire. Proud of you. Big things ahead." 7 words if you didn't count my name. My mother gave me a scarf. My father gave me nothing at lunch. He waited until 2 days later and called me to his office at the old Whitman Inn near Portland. I still remember the smell of the lobby, lemon cleaner and stale carpet. The same smell I had worked around since I was 16. He didn't ask how I felt about graduating. He didn't ask what I wanted. He opened a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and pushed it toward me without looking up from his laptop. "I'm transferring you a property," he said. I opened the envelope. Inside was the deed to Pine Ash Motor Lodge, an abandoned roadside motel outside Hood River, built in 1974, closed since 2009, sitting on 9 acres of overgrown land at the edge of a forest road, nobody used unless they were lost. I had heard the name before. Everyone in the family had. It was the property my grandfather bought during a bad expansion year and regretted until he died. My father used to call it the Mildew Museum. The appraisal inside the envelope was dated 8 months earlier. Land value, $286,000. Structure value, 0. Required repairs estimated at $180,000 minimum. Roof damage, mold risk, septic concerns, electrical system outdated. My father had written one note on a yellow sticky pad and stuck it to the front page. barely worth saving. "You're giving me a condemned motel?" I asked. He finally looked up. "I'm giving you property. Ethan got a condo and investment capital." His jaw tightened. Ethan has a business mind. I waited. I thought maybe he would hear himself. He didn't. "You like hospitality," he said. "You like little creative things. Paint the rooms. Make it cute. Or sell it if you can find someone dumb enough to buy it." My mother, who had come to stand in the doorway, said softly, "It could be peaceful for you, Claire." Peaceful. That was the word they used when they meant small, quiet, out of the way, not threatening. My father leaned back in his chair and gave me the sentence I carried longer than any diploma. "Take the old lodge. At least you can't ruin anything important." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I folded the appraisal, put it back into the envelope, and said, "Okay." He looked almost disappointed. Maybe he had wanted a fight so he could call me ungrateful. Instead, I thanked him, walked out of the office, sat in my car for 23 minutes, and stared at the envelope on the passenger seat. Ethan had been handed a skyline. I had been handed rot, weeds, and a roof that needed replacing. The gap between us was not just money, it was belief. They invested in him because they expected him to rise. They gave me the thing they had already decided was dead. 3 weeks later, I drove to Hood River with 2 suitcases, a used mattress strapped badly to the back of my Subaru, $6,218 in my checking account, and no plan except not to go back. The motel looked worse in person. The sign still said Pine Ash Motor Lodge, though 3 letters were missing, so from the road it read P-N-E-A-H-M Torlod E. 12 rooms sat in a crooked row, doors swollen from rain, curtains yellowed behind cracked windows. Blackberry vines had swallowed the pool fence. The office smelled like damp wood, mouse droppings, and something metallic I didn't want to identify. Room 3 had the least mold, so I chose it for myself. The heater worked if I kicked the side panel twice. The shower ran brown for the first 6 minutes. That first night, wind pushed through the gap under the door and lifted the corner of my blanket. I lay awake listening to branches scrape the roof and thinking about Ethan's condo with heated floors and a view of Elliott Bay. At 2:14 a.m., I got up, walked outside in socks, and stood in the gravel lot under a sky so full of stars it looked fake. Behind the motel, beyond the cracked pool and the dead lawn, the land sloped gently toward the tree line. In the dark, I could not see the weeds. I could only see space, 9 acres of it, mine. Not because they believed in me, but because they didn't. The next morning, I found a patch of wild lupine blooming near the back fence, purple and blue against the dry grass. I knelt there in the dirt with my coffee getting cold in one hand and the appraisal in the other. Structure value, 0. Required repairs, impossible. Barely worth saving. I folded my father's sticky note and put it in my wallet. Then I touched the flowers and said out loud, to no one, "I'm going to make this place worth more than everything you gave him." I didn't know how. I only knew I meant it. And 4 years later, when Ethan's truck rolled through my gate with empty boxes in the back, ready to take what he thought still belonged to the family, he had no idea the motel had stopped being Pine Ash long before he arrived. The 18th of June, 2021. 4 days after moving into Pine Ash Motor Lodge, I realized something my father had never bothered to learn about me. I wasn't afraid of hard work. I was afraid of wasting hard work. There was a difference. Anyone could work hard. Plenty of people did. My father worked hard. My mother worked hard. Ethan worked hard when something benefited Ethan. The question was whether the work built anything. Standing in the middle of 9 acres of weeds and dying grass with less than $6,000 left in my account, I wasn't sure. The motel looked worse every morning. Room 5 had water damage spreading across half the ceiling. Room 8 smelled like mildew, no matter how many windows I opened. The office roof leaked whenever it rained. The pool looked abandoned enough to be featured in a horror movie. The Pine Ash sign leaned another inch every week. Some days I walked the property carrying a notebook and spent hours listing problems. Broken fence sections, dead shrubs, electrical issues, rotten deck boards, cracked pavement, drainage failures. I stopped counting after 93 separate repairs. The estimate from a local contractor came back at $187,000. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, because I had $5,641 in my checking account. $187,000 might as well have been $10 million. That first month I survived on groceries that cost less than $60 a week. rice, eggs, peanut butter, pasta, genetic cereal. I bought a used lawnmower from Facebook Marketplace for $80 and spent 6 straight weekends cutting weeds taller than my waist. Sometimes I would stop and stare at the hills behind the motel. They were beautiful in a way the buildings weren't. Green slopes, old pine trees, wildflowers growing where nobody had planted them, open sky stretching for miles. The land felt alive. The motel felt dead. By July, I had exactly one paying guest, a truck driver passing through Oregon, rented room 2 for one night. Revenue, $94. Cleaning supplies cost $22. Electricity cost $12. Profit, $60. I wrote the number in my notebook anyway. $60 was still better than zero. The 27th of July 2021. Temperature 96 degrees. I was pulling weeds near the back fence when a silver pickup truck rolled onto the property. An older woman climbed out. White hair, work boots, sunglasses. She spent 15 minutes walking around without saying a word. Finally, she approached me. "You're Richard Whitman's daughter?" she asked. "Unfortunately," she laughed. "At least you've got a sense of humor." Her name was Helen Brooks, 73 years old. Retired landscape consultant. She had lived in Hood River for almost 40 years. We walked the property together. She didn't spend much time looking at the motel. Instead, she kept looking at the land, the hills, the tree line, the natural flower patches, the creek running along the northern edge. After nearly an hour, she stopped near the back field and turned toward me. "You're looking at the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" "You keep looking at buildings." She pointed toward the valley. "That's where your value is." I looked where she pointed. Grass, trees, wildflowers, nothing else. Nobody but. Before driving away, she handed me a business card. "Call me when you stop trying to save a motel and start trying to build something people actually want." I kept that card in my wallet for 2 months. August arrived, then September, then October. My parents never visited, not once. My mother called twice. Both conversations lasted less than 90 seconds. Ethan never called at all. His Instagram showed yacht parties in Seattle, ski trips, investment conferences, and rooftop dinners. My Instagram showed weeds. Sometimes I would compare the 2 accounts and wonder if we were even related. Thanksgiving 2021 came and went. I drove 2 hours to my parents' house. Ethan arrived late wearing a new Rolex. My father spent 45 minutes asking him about investments and market opportunities. At one point, my mother asked me how the motel was doing. I answered, "Still standing." She smiled politely and changed the subject. That was the entire conversation. I drove back to Pine Ash that night in silence. Snow started falling halfway home. I remember gripping the steering wheel and thinking about the difference between us. Ethan had been given opportunities because everyone assumed he would succeed. I had been given leftovers because nobody cared whether I did. The realization hurt more than I expected. December 2021. Business revenue for the month, $412. Expenses, $1,863. Loss, $1,450. 1. January 2022. Revenue, $370. Expenses, $1,720. February 2022. Revenue, $506. Expenses, $1,911. Every month, the numbers told the same story. I was losing. Slowly, consistently, predictably. Then March happened. The 17th of March 2022. I called Helen. We spent 6 hours walking the property. She brought maps, soil reports, topographic surveys. We examined every acre. Around 4 in the afternoon, we reached the highest point overlooking the valley. The Columbia River shimmered in the distance. Wildflowers covered the slopes below us. Helen stood quietly for almost a minute. Then she said something that changed everything. "This place isn't a motel." I looked at her. "Then what is it?" "It's an escape." She pointed toward the mountains. "People pay thousands of dollars to find what you're standing in for free." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the office until 2 in the morning, researching wellness retreats, eco-lodges, glamping destinations, outdoor wedding venues, and boutique hospitality brands. By sunrise, I had filled 23 notebook pages. For the first time since moving there, I felt something dangerous. Hope. Not confidence. Not certainty. Hope. April 2022. I created a new Instagram account. No marketing strategy, no business plan, just photos. Wildflowers at sunrise. Fog drifting through trees. Golden light over the valley. Quiet corners of the property nobody had noticed in years. 30 followers became 60. 60 became 120. By May, I had almost 400 followers. Tiny numbers by influencer standards. Massive numbers by mine. One afternoon, a woman from Portland sent a message, asking if she could visit and take engagement photos. She offered $300. I almost said no because the property still looked unfinished. Then I remembered unfinished things still had value. She came the following Saturday. 2 weeks later, another photographer booked. Then another. Then a wedding planner called asking if the property would ever host small events. For the first time, money was coming in from the land instead of the motel rooms. Helen had been right. The buildings weren't the future. The experience was. The 11th of June 2022. Exactly 1 year after moving in. I posted a 40-second video showing wildflowers moving in the wind during sunset. No music. No editing. No filters. Just the land. I put my phone down and went back to work. The next morning I woke up and checked Instagram. 42,000 views. I refreshed the screen. 42,000. By noon, the number had crossed 100,000. By midnight, it passed 400,000. My inbox filled with messages from strangers asking the same question. Where is this place? I sat alone in the office, staring at the screen, while notification after notification appeared. Then one message arrived from an account with a blue verification badge. I opened it. Read it once. Then again. Then a third time. The message began with 7 words that would change the rest of my life. We would like to discuss a partnership. Chapter 3, the 12th of June 2022, 6:18 a.m. I sat behind the cracked front desk of Pine Ash Motor Lodge staring at the message like my phone had made a mistake. We would like to discuss a partnership. The account belonged to North Star Collective, a boutique travel brand based in Bend, Oregon, with almost 900,000 followers and partnerships with small retreats across the Pacific Northwest. I clicked their profile 3 times just to make sure it wasn't fake. It wasn't. They had featured cabins in Montana, vineyard stays in California, desert domes in Arizona, and treehouse resorts that charged more per night than I used to make in a week. And now they were messaging me. Me, the woman eating peanut butter toast over a ledger showing 4 straight months of losses. I didn't answer immediately. I got up, walked outside, crossed the gravel lot, and stood in the wildflower field while the sun came over the hills. My father had called this place barely worth saving. Ethan had once joked at dinner that I was running a motel for ghosts. My mother had called it peaceful, the word she used when she meant irrelevant, but strangers were looking at the same land and seeing something else. By 8:00 a.m., the video had reached 680,000 views. By noon, 1.2 million. My follower count jumped from 417 to 8,000, 900 inches less than 24 hours. Messages poured in so fast I couldn't keep up. Couples asked about elopements. Photographers asked about day passes. Yoga instructors asked about retreat weekends. A Portland lifestyle magazine wanted an interview. Someone from a travel podcast asked if I would tell the story of restoring the lodge. Restoring. That word almost made me laugh. I had not restored anything yet. I had survived beside it. There was a difference. Still, opportunity doesn't wait until you're ready, so at 12:43 p.m., I replied to North Star Collective, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm open to a conversation." Their response came 11 minutes later. "Can you do Thursday at 10 a.m.? Bring rates, availability, and your vision for the property." My vision. I looked around the office at the stained ceiling tiles, the broken vending machine, the desk drawer that only opened if I pulled it sideways, and I realized I had 72 hours to invent a vision professional enough to say out loud. I called Helen first. She answered on the second ring. "It happened, didn't it?" she said. "How did you know? Because places like yours don't stay hidden forever." I told her about the video, the followers, the partnership request. She didn't sound surprised. That almost annoyed me. "What do I say to them?" I asked. "You tell them the truth, but not the desperate version." "What's the desperate version?" "That you need money." "I do need money. Of course you do. But need makes people discount you. Value makes people invest." That afternoon, Helen came over with folders, coffee, and a yellow legal pad. We sat at the front desk for 5 hours building Pine Ash into something I could explain. Not a motel. Not a roadside stop. A nature-based retreat for people who wanted quiet, privacy, and beauty, without the fake luxury of places built only for Instagram. We listed assets: 9 acres, mountain views, wildflower fields, 12 existing rooms, access to hiking, 1 hour from Portland, seasonal creek, event potential, low noise pollution, clear night sky. Then we listed problems, but Helen made me rename them as development phases. Roof repairs became Phase 1 infrastructure. Room renovations became guest experience upgrade. The abandoned pool became future courtyard garden. By midnight, I had a 6-page proposal and a name circled at the top: Wildridge Retreat. I stared at it for a long time. Pine Ash sounded like something dying. Wildridge sounded like something beginning. Thursday, the 16th of June 2022, 9:57 a.m. I joined the video call wearing the only blazer I owned, sitting at the cleanest corner of the office with a plant hiding the worst water stain behind me. The woman from North Star was named Lillian Reed, 39, sharp bob haircut, calm voice, the kind of person who could say no without sounding rude. She asked how long I'd owned the property. I said 1 year. She asked occupancy rate. I said 12%, then immediately wanted to disappear. She asked what made the place different. I looked down at my notes, then stopped myself. People don't come here because it's polished, I said. They come here because it feels untouched. The mistake would be trying to make it look like every other boutique retreat online. The land is the product. The quiet is the product. The rooms just need to stop getting in the way. Lillian didn't speak for 4 seconds. Then she smiled. That's the first smart thing anyone has said to me this week. The call lasted 48 minutes. North Star offered to feature the property in a summer series if I could host 3 influencer stays, 2 photographer access days, and 1 weekend micro-retreat within 60 days. They would not pay up front, but their feature could bring bookings. Exposure. I hated that word. Exposure didn't pay electric bills, but invisibility paid even less. I agreed. After the call, I walked outside and screamed into the field, not from joy, from terror. Because now, I had to make it real. I had 60 days to turn a collapsing motel into something that would not embarrass me in front of the internet. I borrowed $4,000 from Brooke, my best friend from college, after promising to pay her back with 10% interest. She transferred the money without making me beg. I always knew you were going to do something ridiculous and brilliant, she said. This is both. I used $1,200 to repaint 3 rooms, $860 on bedding, $340 on second-hand outdoor furniture, $500 on gravel for the worst part of the lot, $275 on string lights, $180 on wildflower seed mixes, $210 on cleaning supplies, and the rest on repairs I couldn't legally ignore. I did nearly all the labor myself. I painted until my shoulders burned. I scrubbed bathrooms until my knees bruised. I carried furniture alone because I didn't want to pay for help. Helen showed up most mornings and pretended she was only there to supervise, then spent 3 hours trimming trails or planting flowers. By July, Room 2, Room 3, and Room 6 looked almost beautiful if you didn't inspect the baseboards too closely. I renamed them after local wildflowers: lupine, yarrow, clover. I created a booking page under the new name, Wildridge Retreat, formerly Pine Ash Motor Lodge. The first North Star photographer arrived July 22nd. She walked the property at sunset, took one look at the fields, and said, "You know people are going to lose their minds over this, right?" I didn't know. I hoped. There was a difference. The North Star feature went live the 4th of August 2022 at 7:00 p.m. By 7:30, I had 12 booking requests. By 9:15, 28. By midnight, the next 6 weekends were sold out. Average rate, $189 per night. 3 rooms, Friday through Sunday. Gross weekend revenue, $1,701. It wasn't millions. It wasn't even stable yet. But it was the first time the property made more money in a weekend than I used to make in a month of front desk shifts. I printed the booking confirmation page and taped it above my desk next to my father's sticky note, barely worth saving. Under it, I wrote in black marker, sold out. September revenue was $8,430. Expenses were $5,980. Net profit, $2,450. First profitable month. I sat at the desk staring at the spreadsheet, afraid to breathe in case the numbers changed. Then I called Brooke. I made money, I said. Of course you did. No. Real money. She got quiet. Claire, are you crying? I was. Not because $2,450 solved everything. It didn't. The roof still needed work. The property still needed permits. The motel still had 9 rooms I couldn't rent. But profit meant proof. Proof meant I wasn't delusional. Proof meant my father had been wrong. Thanksgiving 2022, my mother invited me to dinner. I drove 3 hours because some part of me still wanted them to see it. Ethan was there, talking about a luxury cabin development he was putting together near Lake Chelan. My father asked questions for 38 minutes. Financing, investors, projected returns, land acquisition, market timing. Ethan answered with numbers that sounded expensive and confident. When my father finally turned to me, he asked, "Still playing with that motel?" I felt the words land, but this time they didn't knock me down. "It's called Wildridge Retreat now," I said. "We were profitable in September." My mother smiled politely. Ethan laughed into his wine. "Profitable? What, like a few $100?" I looked at him. "A little more than that." My father changed the subject. Driving back that night, I didn't cry. That was new. I got home just after midnight, opened my laptop, and checked the booking calendar. January was already half full. February had 3 retreat inquiries. March had a wedding planner requesting a site visit. I went outside in the cold, walked to the old pine ash sign, and looked at the missing letters. The name didn't fit anymore. The place didn't fit their version of me anymore. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the moment my family finally understood that, they wouldn't come to celebrate. They would come to take. The 14th of October 2023. The email arrived at 6:17 a.m., while I was carrying coffee from the office to the patio overlooking the eastern field. Subject line: Wedding inquiry, full property buyout. I almost ignored it because by then inquiries came in every day. Photographers, retreat organizers, corporate teams looking for weekend escapes, influencers wanting free stays in exchange for content. Most weren't serious. This one was. The bride's family wanted exclusive access to Wildridge Retreat for 4 days. 32 guests. Full property rental. Private dinners. Outdoor ceremony. Bonfire reception. Total budget: $28,000. I read the email twice. Then a third time. My highest booking until then had been $3,400. $28,000 felt unreal. By noon we had a signed contract and a deposit wired into the business account. The number sat there on the screen like a dare. For nearly 2 years I had measured success in hundreds of dollars. Suddenly I was dealing with tens of thousands. That winter changed everything. Wedding inquiries led to more wedding inquiries. Retreat organizers posted photos. Guests tagged friends. Friends booked visits. By January 2024, Wildridge Retreat had become profitable enough that I hired my first full-time employee. Her name was Sarah Jensen, 34, former event coordinator, divorced mother of 2, and infinitely more organized than I would ever be. On her first day she walked into the office, looked at my desk buried under receipts, contracts, notebooks, and coffee cups, then said, "You're either a genius or a disaster. Can I be both?" I asked. She laughed. "Probably." Revenue for January reached $21,800. February hit $24,100. March crossed $31,000. Every month we beat projections. Every month I expected something to go wrong. Years of being underestimated had trained me to expect collapse. Success felt temporary, like a guest who might leave without warning. Then April happened. The 18th of April 2024. Ethan called. First time in nearly 18 months. I almost didn't answer. "Claire, Ethan." Silence. "How's the motel?" he asked. I smiled despite myself. He still hadn't bothered learning the name. "Fine. Mom says you're doing okay." "Doing okay." I looked out the office window at guests drinking coffee beside the flower fields. Something like that. "Listen, random question. Have you ever thought about selling?" There it was. Not congratulations. Not curiosity. Not pride. Business. Always business. "No. You should think about it." "Why?" "The market's hot. Hospitality properties are moving fast. You could cash out." I leaned back in my chair. Not interested. He laughed lightly. Suit yourself. The call ended after 3 minutes. I forgot about it within an hour. Looking back, I shouldn't have. The 7th of June 2024. Wildridge hosted its first major wellness retreat. 42 guests, yoga instructors, nutrition coaches, therapists, sunrise meditation sessions overlooking the valley. 3 years earlier, I had been unclogging toilets alone. Now guests flew in from California and Colorado to spend a weekend on land my father once called worthless. Revenue from the event exceeded $41,000. Sarah and I celebrated with cheap champagne after everyone left. You know this place is becoming famous, right? She asked. I looked around the property, string lights hanging between trees, renovated rooms glowing warm in the evening, wildflowers moving in the wind. Not famous. You're in denial. Maybe I was. Because 3 days later, something happened that neither of us expected. The 10th of June 2024. Tubalas, 12 p.m. A guest posted a drone video online, 47 seconds long. No narration, no music, just sunset over Wildridge, golden light across the fields, guests walking through flowers, mountains in the background. The video exploded. By midnight it had 600,000 views. By morning it passed 2 million. By the following evening it crossed 7 million. Every notification sounded like a fire alarm. Followers flooded in. Journalists called. Travel magazines emailed. Tourism boards reached out. My phone became unusable. Sarah walked into the office carrying a laptop. You're not going to believe this. What now? She turned the screen toward me. National Geographic Travel had shared the video. I stared. That's not real. It's very real. By the end of the week, our follower count grew from 18,000 to 146,000. Booking requests extended 18 months into the future. We stopped accepting new inquiries temporarily because we couldn't keep up. Revenue projections tripled overnight. Then the serious emails started arriving. Hospitality groups, investment firms, real estate developers, acquisition specialists. Most went unanswered. Until one didn't. The 23rd of June 2024. Subject line: Strategic Partnership Inquiry. Sender: Evergreen Hospitality Ventures. I researched them immediately. Portfolio value over $400 million. Luxury boutique hotels across 7 states. Legitimate. Very legitimate. Their vice president of development, Michael Hargrove, requested a meeting. Sarah read the email and nearly dropped her coffee. Claire. I know. Claire. I know. Do you understand what this means? I did. Or at least I thought I did. The meeting was scheduled for July 2nd. I hired an attorney 3 days later. Rebecca Alvarez, hospitality law specialist. $400 an hour and worth every cent. During our first consultation, she asked a question nobody else had asked. What do you want? From what? This. She gestured toward the property outside the window. Money? Control? Growth? Validation? The last word hit harder than the others. Validation. That was dangerous because validation could make people sell things they loved. I don't know, I admitted. Rebecca nodded. Figure it out before someone offers you a lot of money. The 2nd of July 2024. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 19 minutes. Michael Hargrove arrived with a financial analyst and a development director. They walked the property, asked questions, took notes, measured potential, then they made their offer. They wanted Wildridge, the property, the business, the brand, everything. Initial valuation, $3.4 million. I sat perfectly still while they spoke. $3.4 million. The motel my father considered barely worth saving. The land Ethan once laughed at. $3.4 million. Michael finished his presentation and slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to move quickly. Rebecca placed one hand over the folder before I touched it. A silent reminder. Don't react. Don't rush. Don't tell them what the number does to your heart. We reviewed the details later that evening. Rebecca's assessment was blunt. They're not insulting you. That's good. But they're hoping emotion closes the deal. Meaning? Meaning they think $3.4 million sounds life-changing. It is life-changing. She smiled. Then, let's negotiate something even more life-changing. 2 days later I countered. Higher purchase price. Equity participation. Long-term creative control. Executive position. Profit sharing. Michael surprised me by smiling halfway through the negotiation. You've done this before? He asked. No. Then you've got good instincts. The conversations continued. Contracts moved back and forth. Lawyers exchanged revisions. Numbers shifted. Everything accelerated. And while it accelerated, something else happened. The 5th of July 2024. My mother called. Her voice sounded different. Nervous. Careful. Claire, your father and I would like to visit. I glanced at the contract draft sitting on my desk. Why? Silence. Then she said the words that made every warning bell in my head start ringing. We need to talk about Ethan. The 6th of July 2024. My mother arrived at Wildridge Retreat at 10:42 a.m. alone. No phone call beforehand. No warning beyond the conversation the night before. I was walking the Eastern Trail with a wedding planner when Sarah texted me. Your mom is here. She looks serious. I knew immediately it wasn't a social visit. My mother had ignored almost every milestone of the previous 3 years. She hadn't visited when we hosted our first wedding. She hadn't visited when local magazines featured Wildridge. She hadn't visited when revenue crossed 6 figures. People don't suddenly become interested in your success after ignoring it for years. They become interested when they need something. By the time I reached the office, she was standing beside the reception desk pretending to admire the renovations. This place looks beautiful, she said. It was the first compliment she had ever given me about the property. Somehow that made it feel worse. What happened with Ethan? I asked. Her smile disappeared immediately. We sat outside on the patio overlooking the fields. She didn't ask about business. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask whether I was happy. She went straight to the problem. Your brother is in trouble. There it was. The real reason she had come. I listened while she explained. Ethan's luxury development project near Lake Chelan had collapsed. Construction costs exploded. Investors pulled out. Private lenders stepped in. Then interest rates climbed. Then lawsuits started. Then everything unraveled. The deeper she went into the story, the more familiar it sounded. Not because I understood finance. Because I recognized the pattern. Every decision had been built on the assumption that someone else would rescue him if things went wrong. My mother finally stopped talking and looked at me. How much? I asked. She swallowed. Close to $1 million. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the number was so large it felt disconnected from reality. And, I said, and your father and I don't have that kind of money. There was a long pause. Then she said the thing I had known was coming before she even arrived. But Wildridge is valuable now. I looked across the valley toward the flower fields. 3 years of work stood between the woman I had been and the woman sitting there. 3 years of debt. 3 years of doubt. 3 years of being invisible. You want me to help Ethan. He's your brother. Not yes, not no. Just family. The word people use when they want access to something they didn't help build. I stood up. I have meetings. Claire, I have meetings. She left 30 minutes later. Before driving away, she looked back at the property and said something that stayed with me. Your father thinks you'll do the right thing. The right thing. I spent the rest of the day trying not to think about what she meant. July 7th. Rebecca called. Evergreen Hospitality accepted almost every major term of our counteroffer. Revised valuation, $4.1 million. Executive Creative Director position. Annual compensation package. Revenue participation. Long-term branding authority. I sat there staring at the contract summary while she spoke. $4.1 million. 3 years earlier my father had handed me property he valued at almost nothing. Now professional investors valued the business at more than $4 million. Claire? Rebecca said. Are you still there? Yeah. You okay? I think so. Good. Because this gets more complicated from here. She was right. The next complication arrived 2 days later. The 9th of July 2024. 8:14 p.m. An email appeared in my inbox, forwarded accidentally by my mother. At least that's what she claimed later. The sender was Ethan. The recipient was both my parents. The subject line read, "We need to move fast." I opened it. Then I read it again. Then a third time. Ethan wrote that Wildridge could solve everything. He estimated the property was probably worth between $3 and $4 million now. He suggested convincing me to transfer ownership back to the family before any sale happened. He described Wildridge as the old motel Claire got lucky with. Got lucky. 3 years of 14-hour workdays reduced to luck. Then came the sentence that changed something inside me. She's still emotional about Dad giving me the condo. Use that if you need to. I stared at those words for nearly a minute. Use that if you need to. Not Claire. Not his sister. Not a person. A problem to be managed. An asset to be leveraged. A negotiation. I forwarded the email to Rebecca immediately. 5 minutes later she called. You need to save that. Already did. 3 copies, minimum. Done. Good. She paused. How angry are you? Very. Stay angry. Just don't let them see it. July 10th. My father called. First conversation we'd had in almost 9 months. Your mother says you're upset. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's how we're describing this? Silence? Then his voice hardened. Your brother needs help. Your brother needed help when he started borrowing money. Claire. No. Don't do that. Don't use that tone with me now. Another silence. Finally, he said, we should talk in person. About what? The future of the property. There it was. Not Wildridge. Not the business. Not my future. The property. Like I was still the 23-year-old girl sitting in his office holding a worthless deed. We agreed to meet Sunday. After hanging up, I walked the property alone. Sunset painted the hills gold. Guests laughed near the fire pit. A wedding photographer was packing equipment near the western field. The business was alive, growing, breathing. Every path, every flower bed, every renovated room existed because I refused to quit. The idea that someone could look at all of it and still think it belonged to them felt almost unbelievable. July 11th. Rebecca finalized the closing schedule with Evergreen Hospitality. July 14th. Noon. Public signing ceremony. Press invitations. Community leaders. Business partners. Local media. Evergreen loved the publicity. So did I. Because if my family planned to pressure me, I wanted witnesses. Lots of them. By evening, more than 50 guests had confirmed attendance. Sarah helped coordinate logistics. Catering was booked, seating arranged, signage printed. Everything was moving fast, very fast. July 12th. My mother returned. This time she wasn't alone. My father stood beside her. Older than I remembered, tired. Ethan wasn't there. Not yet. We sat outside overlooking the valley. No small talk, no pretending. My mother spoke first. We're running out of time. For what? Ethan. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. How much do you need? I asked. Relief flashed across both their faces. Too quickly. Like they thought I was giving in. Then I continued. Because I assume you've already calculated exactly how much of my life you need to save his. Neither of them answered. My father finally looked up. Claire, you're successful now. You can rebuild. I felt something inside me go completely still. Not angry, not hurt. Still, because in that moment I finally understood. They hadn't changed. They still believed Ethan was the investment and I was the backup plan. They still believed what I built mattered less than what he lost. My mother took a breath. You have 72 hours to make the right decision. 72 hours. The exact phrase. The exact tone. Like a verdict. Like an order. Like I still belong to them. I smiled. It surprised all 3 of us. Okay, I said. I'll give you my answer on July 14th. My mother relaxed immediately. My father looked relieved. They thought they had won. They stood, got into the car, and drove away. I watched them disappear down the road. Then I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca. She answered immediately. How bad was it? Bad enough. What do you want to do? I looked toward the main entrance where workers were installing a massive banner for Sunday's event. I could already imagine my family's faces when they saw it. I want every seat filled. That's all? Rebecca asked. I smiled again. For now, because in exactly 48 hours, my family was coming to take back the motel they thought I had gotten lucky with. What they didn't know was that by the time they arrived, Wildridge Retreat would no longer belong to me at all. And that realization was going to hit them in front of everyone. The 14th of July 2024, at exactly 12:27 p.m., the contracts were signed. 3 years of debt, uncertainty, loneliness, and stubborn determination came down to ink on paper. The applause around me sounded distant at first. Cameras flashed, champagne bottles opened, guests stood to congratulate me. Michael Hargrove shook my hand. Rebecca smiled. Sarah hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my pen. But none of that was what I noticed. What I noticed was Ethan standing 20 feet away beside my parents, staring at the documents as if they had personally betrayed him. My mother looked pale. My father looked exhausted. For years I had imagined this moment differently. I thought victory would feel loud. I thought it would feel satisfying. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. Like reaching the top of a mountain and realizing the climb had mattered more than the view. Ethan finally broke the silence. "You sold it?" he asked. I turned toward him. "Yes. You knew I needed help." The words hung in the air. 50 people stood around us, but suddenly it felt like we were the only 2 people on the property. "I knew you wanted help," I said. "That's different." His face tightened. "I'm your brother. And when Dad bought you a condo in Seattle, did you offer me half?" He didn't answer. "When you received investment money for your businesses, did you offer me a percentage?" Still nothing. "When I spent winters sleeping beside a broken heater because I couldn't afford repairs, where were you?" Ethan looked away. The answer was obvious. He wasn't there. My mother stepped forward. "Claire, please. This isn't the place." I laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because after all these years, they still didn't understand. "This is exactly the place," I said. "You wanted me to make this decision in front of family. The problem is that for the last 3 years, the people standing here became more of a family to me than you were." I gestured toward the crowd. Sarah, Rebecca, Helen, business partners, guests who had supported Wildridge before anyone believed in it. People who showed up when I needed encouragement instead of explanations. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We gave you the property. You gave me something you thought was worthless." Silence. Absolute silence. My father finally stepped forward. For a moment he looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. Like the certainty he carried throughout my childhood had finally started to crack. "Margaret," he said quietly. "Stop." She turned toward him. "Richard." "No. Stop." Then he looked directly at me. For the first time in years, he didn't look past me. He didn't compare me. He didn't measure me against Ethan. He simply looked at me. I was wrong. 3 words. I had imagined hearing them 1,000 times. In my fantasies, they fixed everything. In reality, they didn't. They couldn't give me back the nights I cried alone in room 3. They couldn't give me back the birthdays forgotten because Ethan had another crisis. They couldn't give me back the years I spent believing maybe there really was something wrong with me. But they mattered anyway. "I thought Ethan would always succeed," my father continued. "I thought you needed protection from failure. I convinced myself I was helping both of you. The truth is that I underestimated you and overprotected him." His voice shook. "I invested in him because I believed in him. I gave you leftovers because I didn't." Hearing it out loud hurt more than I expected, because that had always been the real wound. Not the money, not the condo, not the motel. Belief. Parents teach their children what they're worth long before the world gets a chance to. My father had spent years teaching Ethan he could accomplish anything. He had spent years teaching me to expect less. "There were nights I thought you were right," I admitted. "There were nights I thought maybe I wasn't capable of anything bigger." My father's eyes dropped toward the ground. "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "I know." For a moment nobody spoke. Then Ethan surprised me. "I'm sorry too." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought what happened to you was luck. I thought I deserved more because I had always gotten more. I was wrong." I studied him carefully. For the first time in my life, he wasn't talking like the favorite child. He wasn't talking like the future success story. He sounded like a man who had finally run out of excuses. "I can't fix this for you," I said. "I know. I'm not giving you money. I know. And I'm not sacrificing what I built because you made bad decisions." Ethan nodded. "I know." That was the moment I realized something important. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need them to suffer. I didn't need them to lose everything just because I almost had. What I had wanted all along wasn't their pain. It was the truth. And standing there in front of everyone, for the first time, the truth was finally visible. The celebration continued after that. Reporters asked questions. Guests toasted. Photos were taken. Contracts were filed. By late afternoon, most people had gone home. My parents left quietly. Ethan left with them. None of us knew what the future looked like. Maybe reconciliation. Maybe distance. Maybe something in between. Real life rarely offers clean endings. 6 months later, Wildridge employed 11 full-time staff members. Revenue exceeded every projection Evergreen Hospitality had originally created. New guest cabins were under construction. National travel publications featured the property. The business that once struggled to earn a few $100s a month now generated more revenue in a week than I used to make in an entire year. On the 1st of January 2025, I stood alone on the ridge overlooking the property. Snow covered the fields. The mountains stretched across the horizon. The same land my father once called barely worth saving now supported dozens of families and welcomed thousands of visitors every year. I thought about the version of myself who arrived here 3 years earlier with 2 suitcases, a failing property, and more doubt than confidence. If I could have spoken to that girl, I would have told her something simple. The people who underestimate you are not always your enemies. Sometimes they're the people you love most. Sometimes they're the people whose approval you've been chasing your entire life. But their opinion is not your future. Their expectations are not your ceiling. Their limitations do not become yours unless you allow them to. That's what Wildridge taught me. Not how to run a business. Not how to negotiate contracts. Not how to build wealth. It taught me that value exists long before anyone recognizes it. The land had value before investors arrived. The property had value before it went viral, and I had value long before my family finally saw it. If you're listening to this story today and you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, compared to someone else, or treated like the less important child, I hope you remember that. You don't need someone's permission to become more than they expected. You don't need someone's belief before believing in yourself. And you certainly don't need someone's approval to keep building the life you want. If Claire's journey reminded you of your own, share your story in the comments, because someone reading it may need that encouragement more than you realize. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, family, and people who refuse to stay where others place them, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every week we share stories that prove a simple truth. Where you begin is not where you have to end. As the sun set over Wildridge that evening, I stood in the snow and looked across the property one last time. The motel they thought would break me had become the thing that saved me. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't need anyone else's opinion to know exactly what I was worth.